Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, good evening, or good evening. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just trying to make sure that we're live over on Rumble. All right, okay, we're good. We got audio. Appreciate you all tuning in for this. I know it's short notice. I wish I could do a more consistent schedule, and probably won't be able to until my kids start school, when I'll start doing it like once or twice a week on a set time every single week. But until then, I gotta squeeze these in whenever I can. That's what she said. But I love this series, and I'm excited to go through this one. This one is all about foreign interference, and part 7 of the Devolution Series. And so the reason I'm doing this is, you know, I wrote this series back in 2021 into 2022, and I had this idea originally is going back through these articles as read by Patrick Gunnels and stopping and commenting on it, because it's a good refresher for myself, and it's interesting to see what's changed, and also, you know, maybe there's some stuff that I'd forgotten about or whatever, you know, that's relevant to what's going on today. So we're going to go through part 7. We'll listen to Patrick Gunnels. Before we do any of that, though, I do want to get a quick word in from the sponsor of this show, and I truly appreciate this company sponsoring us. I think this is the first official sponsor we've had. We did have Patrick sponsor one, but real quick, from Conscious Strength.
What's up, Badlands fam? It's your favorite shit stirrer, Jordan here, and today I'm here to talk to you about my company, Conscious Strength, now an official Badlands sponsor. The mission of this brand is to bring knowledge about health to the forefront and expose lies from big pharma, big ag, and nutrition industry clickbait. I also work with small producers to bring you quality supplements at affordable prices. My most popular product is Myco Coffee, an organic instant coffee powered up with medicinal mushroom extracts. Detoxifying zeolite, anti-inflammatory curcumin, oregano oil, and ormus are a couple big sellers too. Go to the website consciousstrength.net to check out these products, sign up for the newsletter, and figure out where to follow on social media. And if you're going to GART 5 in South Dakota next month, I'll be there, along with a booth for Conscious Strength. Hope to see you guys there.
Thank you, Conscious Strength, consciousstrength.net. Jordan is my favorite shit stirrer. He gets a bad rap sometimes, but I love that dude. He's been very loyal, very, you know, supportive, just all around good dude. So, you know, I appreciate you guys supporting our sponsors. If you're looking for health products, go to his website, subscribe to his newsletter, and check out that coffee especially. I love the organic coffees with the mushroom supplements in them. So good. And so thank you, Jordan and Conscious Strength, for sponsoring this show. And one quick reminder, at the end of this episode, like I do every episode, I'll be heading over to locals only, and we'll be doing a subscribers only Q&A or chat or whatever you guys want to do. I should have a little bit more time than I normally do to talk over there. So if we have a good crowd and people are talking, I'll stay with you guys for a little bit. I have till, I really have about 2 full hours here. I probably don't want to use up all of that time, but about 2 hours. So if you're not sure how to do that, on the bottom of the stream here, this big red button underneath the episode that says join. You click on that. That'll take you to our locals community. You can subscribe over there, support Badlands Media and our creators, and get some exclusive content. We're looking to get more stuff over there. Right now, I'm pretty much the only one using it, but we are going to start getting more people on board with some behind the scenes content. So check that out. But I think without further ado, let's jump into part 7 here. Should be a fun one.
It's patelpatriot.substack.com. And of course, if you have any questions or would just like to engage in devolution talk, you email patelpatriot or join Telegram. I think the patelpatriot@gmail.com, possibly patel.patriot. Anyway, go to Telegram, Patel Patriot Chat. Don't forget to subscribe. All right. So the title of this particular Devolution Part 7, Foreign Interference. Everybody check out Jillian Reese Art for the cutout of this on the stream. On Jillian Reese Art on Odyssey. Setting the table. Did you know that on January 5th, 2021, Donald Trump signed an executive order which I believe further proves that devolution is real? January 6th, was such a shit show that this executive order largely went unnoticed in the background of the insurrection. I didn't know about it until very recently. Before I show you that order, let me provide the needed background first.
So this is actually funny because I think the Q community was pretty tuned in to Executive Order 13848. And correct me if I'm wrong. I still haven't read through all the drops or anything, but I'm pretty sure they were very familiar with that executive order. Me, as at the time of everything going on, I would consider myself a normie. I wasn't really aware of that executive order, and I didn't really dig into it until later on. Now, at the time of writing this series, it's like, man, this is a pretty damn important executive order. My thought process on this executive order has definitely changed the more I've learned about how executive orders work and everything. And I don't even think this is the most significant executive order, not even close, in terms of devolution. There are at least 3 or 4 other ones that I think are much more important. I will talk as we go through this why Executive Order 13848 is important, but I just wanted to state that because here I say that, like, how big of a deal it was. Now it proves devolution. And remember, guys, with devolution, there's a ton of evidence that something was put in place before Trump left office. I'm excited to get a little further into the series. I think it's part 16 when we talk about those NSPMs and have that whole timeline of stuff. I mean, there's just so much evidence that Trump didn't just walk away, right? And everything since then, and some of my speculations and everything, whether I'm right or wrong, we'll talk about this tonight on the Power Hour too. It doesn't take away from the body of evidence that was left in place when Trump left office. The rest, trying to figure out how it plays out, I mean, it's anybody's guess, but this is what the series is about, is going through again the mountains of evidence that Trump didn't just walk away.
On May 11th, 2017, President Trump issued Executive Order 13799, Establishment of Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity. Vice President Mike Pence was the chair of the commission, and they were to, quote, study the registration and voting processes used in federal elections. It was solely an advisory commission and was to submit a report to the president. The commission was met with major backlash after requesting donor data and information from the individual states. At least 8 lawsuits were filed challenging the commission, alleging that its activities violated the law. On January 3rd, 2018, without any report having been released, Trump disbanded the commission, blaming mostly Democrat states. A tweet, Donald J. Trump, January 4th, 2018, quote, many mostly Democrat states refused to hand over data from the 2016 election to the Commission on Voter Fraud. They fought hard that the commission did not see their records or methods because they know that many people are voting illegally. System is rigged, must go to voter ID, and then a heart thing, I think. I hope you put that heart there. New tweet. As Americans, you need identification, sometimes in a very strong and accurate form, for almost everything you do, except when it comes to the most important thing, voting for the people that run your country. Push hard for voter identification. January 4th, 2018.
Okay, so let me see if it reads this part.
White House spokesman Sarah Huckabee Sanders said in a statement Wednesday that Trump signed an executive order to dissolve the commission rather than engage in endless legal battles at taxpayer expense.
Later on in the series, when we talk about the 2,000 Mules, we go a little bit further into detail about this commission. So I won't dwell on it too much right now, but I do want to reiterate why I think this is important. This executive order of Trump establishing this Presidential Advisory Committee on the elections, this was Trump's attempt while in office to fix our election system. Okay. He tried to do it and he got fought tooth and nail by the Democrats, Mark Elias and people like that. He wasn't able to actually accomplish any major election reform. And this is why I don't think it's possible. This is where my mindset comes from and why I think we're going to see another stolen election, and why that needs to be what causes some sort of awakening in election reform prior to Trump actually taking office, because Trump already showed that unless we have the full House, and even then didn't he have the Republicans in both the House and the Senate? I'm pretty sure he did, but it wasn't just them. It was like local governments, governors, and other people, individual states that were fighting back against this. He's not going to be able to do it. We're not going to be able to fix our elections, which I do still think is one of the most important things we need to do. And so this is important. He showed, he tried, he called it out. He knew it was fake the whole time. Our elections are fake. They're rigged. They cheat. But he wasn't able to fix it. So something else has to accomplish it. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it while he's in office. He's going to get stonewalled again. But again, that's just my opinion on it. But I think it's a valid, logical thought process. Something else needs to happen for us to fix this and right the ship.
On September 12th, 2018, President Trump issued Executive Order 13848, imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in a United States election. Here is a brief description of the executive order. EO 13848I introduces broad sanctions with respect to targeted foreign persons determined to have interfered with a U.S. election directly or indirectly. II introduces a specific analysis and reporting process to identify foreign interference with U.S. elections as well as the foreign persons responsible for it. And III requests recommendations for the president, including remedial measures and whether additional sanctions against targeted foreign persons may be appropriate. Now,
and I'm not even sure, we might get into some of the specifics here as we go through, because I think we're talking about the assessment and everything after the executive order. So a lot of people misconstrue what this executive order actually does. And a lot of people who talk about devolution and stuff get this wrong as well. This is a sanction executive order. This doesn't prevent any form of election interference. It doesn't trigger anything other than assessments and reports. And then based off of those, they can sanction the people who interfered in our election. A lot of people have attributed, like, we can actually prevent this theft because of Executive Order 13848, or we can actually, do this and do that all because of Executive Order 13848. That's not how this executive order works. And the last couple of days on Twitter, I've been wanting to pull my hair out. I've been getting like ulcers pretty much because of people misconstruing stuff from the Federal Register, executive orders and memorandums and Biden delegated authority. It drives me nuts because I studied this stuff so extensively. I went through every one of Trump's executive documents at least once, some of them multiple times, and then his executive orders, which there are like 250 of them or so. I went through those more than that, like 7 or 8, 9, 10 times. I don't even know at this point. But it's important to understand what these things do. When I first went through these, I did think this executive order carried more weight than I do now, because I educated myself on it, and I finally understood that this is, again, a sanctioned executive order, and that's important to understand.
Let's walk through some of the specifics of the bill, the executive order. Accordingly, I hereby order Section 1A, not later than 45 days after the conclusion of a United States election, the Director of National Intelligence, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate executive departments and agencies shall conduct an assessment of any information indicating that a foreign government or any person acting as an agent of or on behalf of a foreign government has acted with the intent or purpose of interfering in that election. The assessment shall identify, to the maximum extent ascertainable, the nature of any foreign interference and any methods employed to execute it, the persons involved, and the foreign government or governments that authorized, directed, sponsored, or supported it. The Director of National Intelligence shall deliver this assessment and appropriate supporting information to the President, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. B. Within 45 days of receiving the assessment and information described in Section 1A of this order, the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate agencies and as appropriate state and local officials, shall deliver to the President, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of Defense a report evaluating with respect to the United States election that is the subject of the assessment described in Section 1A(I), the extent to which any foreign interference that targeted election infrastructure materially affected the security or integrity of that infrastructure, the tabulation of votes, or the timely transmission of election results, and II, if any foreign interference involved activities targeting the infrastructure of or pertaining to a political organization, campaign, or candidate, the extent to which such activities materially affected the security or integrity of the infrastructure, including by unauthorized access to, disclosure or threatened disclosure of, or alteration or falsification of information or data. The report shall identify any material issues of fact with respect to these matters that the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security are unable to evaluate or reach agreement on at the time the report is submitted. The report shall also include updates and recommendations, when appropriate, regarding remedial actions to be taken by the United States government other than the sanctions described in Sections 2 and 3 of this order.
So this one part here, I'll let him go through the recap and then I'll comment, because I think I was just about to sum it up, and we're going to get the summary here in the recap.
To recap, no later than 45 days after the conclusion of a United States election, the DNI, along with others, will conduct an assessment of any information showing foreign interference in our elections. 2. One of the members receiving this assessment is the Secretary of Defense. 3. Within 45 days of receiving that assessment, the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security are to make a report evaluating how badly the foreign interference affected the security and integrity of our election infrastructure, counting of votes, and transmission of results, and if the foreign interference targeted election infrastructure relating to specific campaigns or candidates and how it could have affected the campaign's information or data. One of the members receiving that report is the Secretary of Defense. The report is to include recommendations, if appropriate, regarding remedial actions to be taken by the U.S. government other than the sanctions.
So yeah, this part is pretty important. And it's the one caveat to what I said earlier about this being a sanction-only executive order. The remedial actions and whether something like this was taken, that paints a broad brush. We have no idea what that could mean, and we have no idea what they can suggest. But again, I don't think this executive order has the teeth that most people think it does. And if anything did take place, like any of those remedial actions, obviously I don't think they did those things. I think they had after Biden stole the election in November of 2020, Trump saw it, Trump knew it, had the evidence of it, and he had a myriad of options that he could choose from and how to respond. And the approach that I think they took was one of devolution or continuity of government, whatever they call it specifically, I have no idea. But if there was any other remedial actions that they could have taken, it potentially could have come from here, but I don't think we saw it happen because they chose the route that they did. Does that make sense? But this is a pretty significant bombshell. And I think it's actually in the very next article, part 8, because I'm about to go in here and say, hypothetically, if I'm remembering correctly, I'm about to say, hypothetically, anybody other than, the people listed here can come directly to me at any time with the report or whatever. And I think I speculate the Secretary of Defense could have done that, and they could have done a whole host of things because of that. I think in the very next article, I talk, well, I don't know if it was him. Might have been D.N.I. Ratcliffe, because there was a little bit of evidence of that. But we'll get there. We'll keep going through.
Definition of remedial. 1, intended as a remedy. Something that corrects or counteracts. So, if appropriate, the report could include recommended actions to correct or counteract said foreign interference. Back to the executive order. C. Heads of all relevant agencies shall transmit to the Director of National Intelligence any information relevant to the execution of the Director's duties pursuant to this order as appropriate and consistent with applicable law. If relevant information emerges after the submission of the report mandated by Section 1A of this order, the Director, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate agencies, shall amend the report as appropriate, and the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall amend the report required by Section 1B as appropriate. D. Nothing in this order shall prevent the head of any agency or any other appropriate official from tendering to the president at any time through an appropriate channel any analysis, information, assessment, or evaluation of foreign interference in a United States election. E. If information indicating that foreign interference in a state, tribal, or local election within the United States has occurred is identified, it may be included as appropriate in the assessment mandated by Section 1A of this order, or in the report mandated by Section 1B of this order, or submitted to the president in an independent report.
So it's interesting, there's an assessment that needs to be done within 45 days, and that is done by the Attorney General, which at the time was Bill Barr, except he did retire in late December. So this report would have been due December 18th, but it got delayed. We'll get to that here in a minute. He was still there up to when it was due, but he had retired or stepped away or whatever by the time it actually did come out on January 7th. The other person involved with this first assessment is Chad Wolf, the Secretary of Homeland Security. And I think he resigned early too, January 11th, if I'm not mistaken. But they're the ones who delivered the report, the assessment, and then based on that assessment, there's a report that comes from DNI and other people. But it is interesting, some of these characters, and I don't think I dug into that deeply at the time. But both those guys, I think, are white hats. Not everybody does. I think they're playing a role. But it is interesting because the assessment we get. Oh, you know what? I'm going to keep playing because we are going to get into the more detailed aspects of both the assessment and the report.
This means that at any time, the president, the head of any agency or any other appropriate official may tender to the president any analysis, information, assessment, or evaluation of foreign interference in a U.S. election. This also means that if an appropriate official has any information that indicates foreign interference in a U.S. election, they can submit that information to the president in an independent report. This is a bombshell. Hypothetically speaking, if our military were to come across any information showing foreign interference in a U.S. election, they could report it directly to the president in an independent report and do so at any time. They could completely bypass the heads of every other agency, and they don't have to stick to the 45-day by 45-day timeline. F.
That is very important. And if that did happen, I think in part 8, I speculated it was D&I Ratcliffe right before the Army-Navy football game, when Trump rode the helicopter with him. That's when I speculated it did happen. But it could have happened from other agencies too. It could have happened from the Secretary of Defense. We have no idea. Because if that did happen, there's no publicly available evidence of it. And technically, even with the D&I Ratcliffe one, there's no publicly available evidence of it. It's just pure speculation based on the timing and what Trump tweeted immediately afterwards.
Not later than 30 days following the date of this order, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Attorney General, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Director of National Intelligence shall develop a framework for the process that will be used to carry out their respective responsibilities pursuant to this order. The framework, which may be classified in whole or in part, shall focus on ensuring that agencies fulfill their responsibilities pursuant to this order in a manner that maintains methodological consistency, protects law enforcement or other sensitive information and intelligence sources and methods, maintains an appropriate separation between intelligence functions and policy and legal judgments, ensures that efforts to protect electoral processes and institutions are insulated from political bias, and respects the principles of free speech and open debate. I believe that this part of the executive order is Trump's attempt to weed out all the bad actors in our government agencies. He is allowing them to establish the framework used to carry out this order, and he specifically mentions that this framework ensures that efforts to protect electoral processes and institutions are insulated from political bias and respects the principles of free speech and open debate. Allow me to explain.
I do agree with this. It's more so weeding out the people, not just with the framework, but he can clear if somebody brought to him evidence that there was foreign interference in the election, which I think somebody did at some point, not 100% sure who it is, Ratcliffe, Miller, whatever. Anybody who comes forward with intelligence of the opposite, they're a bad actor. They're clearly trying to subvert him. And especially, I mean, he would have the opportunity then to be like, well, what about this? And they can respond however they want. And these reports are pretty big because they do pretty much say that there was no foreign interference. And it's just crazy to think. We all know the election was stolen. And I still to this day do not think we have seen the actual proof and evidence that Trump has. So whether or not we ever do see that, I mean, I really think we have to at some point, but I've been wrong plenty of times. I could be wrong about that. Maybe we do just narratively move on completely. I don't know. But I really believe 2020 needs to be rectified. Otherwise, we'll never have a safe and secure election moving forward.
Assessment and report as required by Executive Order 13848. The assessment required by EO 138481A was presented to the President, senior officials, and both the Congressional Leadership and Intelligence Oversight Committees on January 7th, 2021. Lots of things seem to have happened around January 6th. This assessment wasn't declassified and released to the public until March 15th, 2021.
The big part about that is it was completely stonewalled. It was supposed to come out on December 18th. That was 45 days from the November 3rd election. But there was a report that came out from Fox News, I think it was. And I don't know if I even get into this in here. I don't think I do. But the report from Fox News was saying, that there's infighting and disagreement on whether or not there was interference. And we'll see here in a little bit that D&I Ratcliffe does this. I think I get into it. Yeah, I do. Okay. I can remember if there's this article or part 8, but we'll see the disagreement they were having. But it is damn convenient that report saying there was some sort of interference and some shenanigans. I mean, the report says there wasn't, but D&I Ratcliffe comes out and says there was. It comes the day after the Electoral College vote, which the fake insurrection, all the bullshit around it comes after that. So even if this report had said, like, yes, there was a bunch of foreign interference, all these things, like it wouldn't have been there in time anyway to do anything, because it was they timed it so that no matter what conclusions you could draw from this assessment, it was too late to do anything about it according to the norms and the rules.
Then Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines said herself that, quote, foreign malign influence is an enduring challenge facing our country. These efforts by U.S. adversaries seek to exacerbate divisions and undermine confidence in our democratic institutions. Addressing this ongoing challenge requires a whole-of-government approach grounded in an accurate understanding of the problem, which the intelligence community, through assessments such as this one, endeavors to provide. The assessment contains 5 key judgments. Key judgment 1. We have no indications that any foreign actor attempted to alter any technical aspect of the voting process in the 2020 U.S. elections, including voter registration, casting ballots, vote tabulation, or reporting results. We assess that it would be difficult for a foreign actor to manipulate election processes at scale without detection by intelligence collection on the actors themselves.
So that's kind of funny they say that, because we know how partisan the intelligence community is. And Trump himself said they're the ones that have been conducting illegal psychological warfare campaigns against the American people for the last 7 years. If you have enough bad actors in the intelligence community, which I believe there are, then they could detect it. They could detect foreign interference manipulating the election at the scale required to actually change the outcome. But whether or not they actually report it or say they found it is a whole nother story. So that's such a bullshit line, in my opinion.
They are right here. It, quote, would be difficult for a foreign actor to manipulate election processes at scale without detection by intelligence collection on the actors themselves. Key judgment 2.
And I say that's pretty much what I'm saying when I said in the article here that they're right. It would be difficult, which means I think they probably did. Somebody likely did find that. It's just the intelligence community didn't tell us it was.
Unlike in 2016, we did not see persistent Russian cyber efforts to gain access to election infrastructure. A key element of Moscow's strategy this election cycle was its use of proxies linked to Russian intelligence to push influence narratives, including misleading or unsubstantiated allegations against President Biden to U.S. media organizations, U.S. officials, and prominent U.S. individuals, including some close to former President Trump and his administration. Unlike 2016, when foreign actors definitively stole the election for Trump. Sarcasm. I believe
that is kind of funny. I mean, they basically, the intelligence community says, and they've called, the Russian interference and everything. Then they're saying here that Russia did try to use cyber efforts to actually access election infrastructure. They're saying they didn't see that now, but they've said the whole time that, Trump was basically a puppet of Putin, right? If that were true, why would Trump not allow him to get access to the election infrastructure to steal the election on his behalf? You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't that, if Trump was truly a Putin puppet, he would have allowed or found a way to allow Russia to interfere in the election, and we would have had a different outcome than Biden taking over, correct?
I believe the, quote, influence narratives they are alluding to here is the Hunter Biden laptop story. CNN confirmed the story on April 2nd, only 18 days after this assessment was released. Time flies when you're trying to cover up the biggest scandal of all time. Side note, the fact that their narrative changed between this assessment and early April is further circumstantial evidence that the defector Dong Jingwei story is true. Moving on to key judgment number 4. We assess that China did not deploy interference efforts and considered, but did not deploy influence efforts intended to change the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. We have high confidence in this judgment. China sought stability in its relationship with the United States and did not view either election outcome as being advantageous enough for China to risk getting caught meddling. The NIO for cyber assesses, however, that China did take some steps to try to undermine former President Trump's re-election. They must have asked China what they should write here. This part was interesting, though. Quote, we have high confidence in this judgment that China didn't deploy interference efforts. China did not view either election outcome as being advantageous enough for China to risk getting caught meddling. However, the National Intelligence Officer for Cyber assesses that China did take some steps to try to undermine former President Trump's re-election. Seems like conflicting reports on China to me. On March 16th, the day after the intelligence community assessment was released, the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security issued their report required by Executive Order 13848-1B. Quote, we, the Department of Justice, including the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, including CISA, have no evidence that any foreign government affiliated actor prevented voting, changed votes, or disrupted the ability to tally votes or to transmit election results in a timely manner, altered any technical aspect of the voting process, or otherwise compromised the integrity of voter registration information of any ballots cast during the 2020 federal elections. The intelligence community, including the FBI and the...
This is such just bullshit propaganda. After everything that's happened these last 4 years, especially, I mean, one of my articles, The Illusion of Democracy, one of the more recent ones I've done, it might have been the most recent one I've done. And it's not even technically part of the Devolution series, but talking about Center for Internet Security and how they got CrowdStrike and all these machines and all this stuff. And then we see the CrowdStrike outage affected voting machines in Arizona or Colorado, whatever it was. And then the, Dominion machines having how many vulnerabilities? 9? It's like we've had so much evidence of election shenanigans come out And it's like the mainstream media is just blind to it and in denial. And the intelligence community too. They just won't address it. And at some point that has to be addressed.
The intelligence community elements of DHS has previously assessed that it would be difficult for a foreign actor to manipulate election processes at scale without detection by intelligence collection, post-election audits, or physical and cybersecurity monitoring of voting systems across the country. We are aware of multiple public claims that one or more foreign governments, including Venezuela, Cuba, or China, owned, directed, or controlled election infrastructure used in the 2020 federal elections, implemented a scheme to manipulate election infrastructure, or tallied, changed, or otherwise manipulated vote counts. Following the election, the Department of Justice, including the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security, including CISA, investigated the public claims and determined that they were not credible.
That is interesting. And I didn't put two and two together here until just now. But if you remember in my addendum series, the draft executive order. So this is addendum 4. We'll get to this later on. But it's almost like they were specifically rebuting this draft executive order from Trump, because Trump talks about the evidence of international and foreign interference and Dominion voting machines and related companies owned or heavily controlled and influenced by foreign agents, countries, and interests. Dominion voting system is intentionally and purposefully designed with inherent errors to create systemic fraud and influence election results. That was Trump's draft executive order that he didn't sign, but this got leaked from the January 6th, committee, whatever bullshit they were doing. So that is, that's interesting. I forgot that they included that, like the little jab in there that, yeah, we've heard these rumors of people getting on to us about these machines, but don't worry, guys, that's not true. They're not credible. Crazy.
None of the above is surprising. We assume the agencies above are littered with Chinese assets. So obviously these reports weren't going to find anything of substance. This is where it starts getting really interesting. On January 7th, 2021, the same day that the assessment required by Executive Order 13848-1A was provided to the higher-ups, Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe released a memo regarding his views on intelligence community election security analysis. Quote, "I do not believe the majority view expressed by intelligence community analysts fully and accurately reflects the scope of the Chinese government's efforts to influence the 2020 US federal elections." Quote, "China analysts were hesitant to assess Chinese actions as undue influence or interference. These analysts appeared reluctant to have their analysis on China brought forward because they tend to disagree with the administration's policies, saying, in effect, I don't want our intelligence used to support those policies. This behavior would constitute a violation of Analytics Standard B, independence of political considerations." CIA officials rejected NIC coordination comments and tried to downplay alternative analyses in their own production during the drafting of the NICA.
It's always the damn CIA. Do you understand that? Those same people who, with the laptop story and all this shit, the Operation Gladio all over the world, they're the ones that were rejecting comments or people with alternative hypotheses about what happened during the 2020 election, and they were framing the narrative to be put forth. It's criminal.
CIA management took actions, quote, pressuring analysts to withdraw their support from the alternative viewpoint on China in an attempt to suppress it. For example, this intelligence community assessment gives the false impression that the NIO Cyber is the only analyst who holds the minority view on China.
And this is the part that I glossed over in this part 7, and it only really stuck out to me later on in part 16 when I was doing the timeline. One of the people who holds the minority view on China, meaning China did some sort of interference in the election, was the NIO, the National Intelligence Officer for cyber, which means the guy who's in charge and responsible for overseeing cyber efforts. thinks China interfered, like they interfered using cyber means, if that makes sense. And we get into this in more detail in part 16, but that is a huge like revelation. And the CIA was suppressing that and all these things. Like, I want to know what he saw. Like, what did the cyber guy see? The guy in charge of overseeing cyber stuff. What did he see from China that gave him a viewpoint that, yeah, they might have interfered in our election, guys? I think that'd be important.
Analytic Standard D requires that coordinated analytic products be, quote, based on all available sources of intelligence. However, because of the highly compartmented nature of some of the relevant intelligence, some analysts' judgments reflected in the majority review are not based on the full body of reporting. Tradecraft Standard 1.
That's pretty interesting, too. They're saying some of the people who said that, we didn't really fully see that it reached the level of interference or whatever, they didn't actually see the full body of the evidence. And he's saying, me being the guy, D.I. Ratcliffe, who did see the full body of evidence, I have an opposing viewpoint than all this. I think that's important to note.
Requires the analytic community to be consistent in the definitions applied to certain terminology and to ensure that the definitions are properly explained. Definitional use of the terms influence and interference are different between the China and Russia analytic communities. The analytic ombudsman found that, quote, terms were applied inconsistently across the analytic community, given analytic differences in the way Russia and China analysts examined their targets. China analysts appeared hesitant to assess Chinese actions as undue influence or interference. As a result, similar actions by Russia and China are assessed and communicated to policymakers differently, potentially leading to the false impression that Russia sought to influence the election, but China did not. In that same spirit, I am adding my voice in support of the stated minority view based on all available sources of intelligence with definitions consistently applied and reached independent of political considerations or undue pressure that the People's Republic of China sought to influence the 2020 U.S. federal elections.
I do find it interesting here as well that he goes back and forth between the words influence and interference throughout his response letter, but then his only conclusion is the influence. And, I'm not sure what that means, because I do think there was some sort of interference. Like the rest of the body of evidence of Trump leaving office doing something lead me to believe that there was interference. It wasn't just an influence campaign trying to influence thoughts and minds to vote against Trump. There had to have been some sort of actual interference in order for Trump to have the authority to implement something like devolution, right? And so it isn't, but he goes back and forth talking about how the NIO from cyber is the only analyst, whatever, who saw there was interference from China, and then his conclusion is influence. So whatever reason for that language, I think it is important, even though I have no idea why he switched it like that.
This is what I meant by Trump used the executive order to weed out bad actors. When the truth comes out, there will be some people in big trouble for covering this up.
That's an understatement.
This whole scenario is another example of why I think devolution through the Department of Defense and the military is the only option. They are the only ones who could have uncovered all the intelligence of foreign interference, and Executive Order 13848 gave the Secretary of Defense the option to go directly to the president at any time and present him with an independent report on the subject. Who was the Secretary of Defense during all of this? None other than Christopher C. Miller. Let us continue. I know this article is so long, but this is all so important and all this ties together. I want to briefly jump back to Executive Order 13848 so we can understand the definition they use for election infrastructure.
So a couple things I want to comment on quick. This paragraph that he just read through, talking about devolution being done through the defense and the military. When I first started writing the series, I my thought process and what I thought I was seeing, was like this big elaborate military and control type thing of devolution. My thought process on the scale of this thing has definitely changed as time has gone on to how much control they actually have. Part 13 is kind of where I would start, and it's the NEFs, and we don't even know which NEFs. It could literally only be one NEF. They're protecting 2, 3. You see hints every now and then of certain things that, like, why isn't the military going into Ukraine, or why are we bombing Iranian-backed militia sites while Biden is negotiating to get back in time? Like, there's certain things and contradictions that you see come up all the time that don't make sense, and why they happen, I don't know, but it's something I believe having to do with devolution. But at the time of writing this article, I was like, that's why I think devolution had been done through the Department of Defense and the military. And in certain sense, I think that's true, but I also think there are other aspects to this. Like, I think there are, these, and in part 13, we'll go through this in much more detail, but it's the public-private partnerships and all those entities that the people part of the Devo team and that FMR committee went to form. I think that it's not solely the Department of Defense, but I think some of this devolution where they devolve your authority to multiple different entities and locations, and people have different responsibilities, whatever that looks like, I think there's people outside the military involved in some of that too, if that makes sense. Oh, I need to press play.
D. The term election infrastructure means information and communications technology and systems used by or on behalf of the federal government or a state or local government in managing the election process, including voter registration databases, voting machines, voting tabulation equipment, and equipment for the secure transmission of election results.
Okay, so what we're about to get into is important, and I'm just now realizing how important it is when it comes to the most recent article I did, the illusion of democracy. Sorry. But I did see a comment in the chat, and I wanted to address this quick. Trump is my POTUS 20, says, John, did you hear that the Secret Service Director Cheadle mentioned COG in her interview yesterday or Monday? I did address this on Monday's Baseless Conspiracies, but we're also going to address it tonight on the Power Hour. It should be a great show. We have lots to talk about, but we're going to address that. In my opinion, as somebody who's constantly wanting some sort of confirmation of devolution or continuity of government being in play, as somebody who is constantly looking for comms and all these things, I think that was a nothing burger. I'll explain why again tonight on the Power Hour. But thank you for putting that question in the chat, guys. And just a reminder, don't forget that after the stream is done, I am going to go over to Locals. And so if you hit the little join button underneath the video on Rumble, you can join up over on Locals, and it'll be a Q&A. I'll take questions and discuss some stuff with you guys over there.
Information on communications technology. On May 15th, 2019, President Trump issued Executive Order 13873, Securing the Information and Communications Technology, ICT, and Services Supply Chain. Here is a summary from the U.S. Department of Commerce.
What we're about to go through, I don't think it's quite as relevant. It's hard to explain. Like, after I wrote this and went on with the series, like, looking back at this now, I'm like, what we're about to read through isn't quite as important as I thought, for the reason I thought it at the time. Because I was trying to get so specific and point out, like, hey, we could have, this could have been, it could have been this specifically. I was thinking these things were important for the wrong reasons, because my thought process has changed. And man, I'm listening to myself say this, and I'm like, you make no sense, brother. And maybe I don't, but we're going to go through this, and some of it is irrelevant, but some of it is important, and I'll explain why later, but it's not for the reasons that I put in this article, if that makes sense.
The executive order. Securing the Information and Communications Technology and Services Supply Chain declares that threats to the information and communications technology and services supply chain by foreign adversaries are a national emergency. The executive order prohibits certain transactions that involve information and communications technology or services designed, developed, manufactured, or supplied by persons owned by, controlled by, or subject to the jurisdiction or direction of a foreign adversary whenever the Secretary of Commerce, in consultation with other federal officials, determines that such a transaction or a class of transactions poses an undue risk of sabotage to or subversion of the design, integrity, manufacturing, production, distribution, installation, operation, or maintenance of information and communications technology or services in the United States. Poses an undue risk of catastrophic effects on the security or resiliency of United States critical infrastructure or the digital economy of the United States, or otherwise poses an unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the security and safety of United States persons. This executive order is essentially saying that the U.S. shouldn't be using ICT that is made by or can be considered controlled by a foreign adversary.
So now, why I think this is that part is important, the ICT, is, again, going back to the article I most recently wrote about illusion of democracy and how the Center for Internet Security, they're the ones that, like, hey, we're going to take the mantle up and get everybody with their defense suite, the cybersecurity suite on all of these election infrastructure, computers and everything. And we're going to have CrowdStrike run the endpoint, the EDR services, whatever, endpoint something on all these computers. And then think to Trump's phone call with Zelensky, where he's talking about CrowdStrike and the server in Ukraine and all these things. Like, the ICT is important because I think because of that, the Center for Internet Security, the CrowdStrike, we just saw how vulnerable they are. Who's to say that they weren't hacked, or they didn't allow somebody to hack, or they didn't hack themselves, any of these election machines, to determine the outcome of these elections? I'm about to go through some stuff and point to China and whatnot. And this is the stuff that I don't think is quite, at the time I was trying to get so specific and like point something out. And I think I was maybe wrong for doing that, and maybe not wrong. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but my thought process has definitely changed. So the ICT stuff is important. The stuff that I'm about to go through, I'm not sure 100% how important it is, but we'll see. Maybe my thought will change as we go through.
The order goes on. I further find that the unrestricted acquisition or use in the United States of information and communications technology or services designed, developed, manufactured, or supplied by persons owned by, controlled by, or subject to the jurisdiction or direction of foreign adversaries augments the ability of foreign adversaries to create and exploit vulnerabilities in information and communications technology or services with potentially catastrophic effects, and thereby constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. What exactly is ICT? ICT, or Information and Communications Technology, or technologies, is the infrastructure and components that enable modern computing. Although there is no single universal definition of ICT, the term is generally accepted to mean all devices, networking components, applications, and systems that combine allow people and organizations to interact in the digital world. Components of an ICT system. ICT encompasses both the internet-enabled sphere as well as the mobile one powered by wireless networks. It also includes antiquated technologies such as landline telephones, radio, and television broadcast, all of which are still widely used today alongside cutting-edge ICT pieces such as artificial intelligence and robotics. ICT is sometimes used synonymously with IT, information technology. However, ICT is generally used to represent a broader, more comprehensive list of all components related to computer and digital technologies than just IT. The list of ICT components is exhaustive, and it continues to grow. Some components, such as computers and telephones, have existed for decades. Others, such as smartphones, digital TVs, and robots, are more recent entries. ICT commonly means more than its list of components, though. It also encompasses the application of all those various components. It's here that the real potential, power, and danger of ICT can be found. But ICT has also created problems and challenges to organizations and individuals alike, as well as to society as a whole. The digitization of data, the expanding use of high-speed internet, and the growing global network together have led to new levels of crime where so-called bad actors can hatch electronically enabled schemes or illegally gain access to systems to steal money, intellectual property, or private information, or to disrupt systems that control critical infrastructure. ICT has also brought automation and robots that displace workers who are unable to transfer their skills to new positions, and ICT has allowed more and more people to limit their interactions with others, creating what some people fear is a population that could lose some of what makes it human. So, let's recap quick and be amazed at what Trump did here. His September 2018 Executive Order 13848 created a path for the Department of Defense and the military to bypass all agencies and report directly to the president any information they find regarding foreign interference in an election. Executive Order 13848 allows for recommendations for other remedial actions not listed in the provided executive order sanctions. Executive Order 13848 defines election infrastructure as ICT and systems used in the election process. His May 2019 Executive Order 13873 prohibits using components in our critical infrastructure made by foreign adversaries. One more thing found in Executive Order 13873 that references something I covered extensively in Devolution Part 5. Quote, B, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall continue to assess and identify entities, hardware, software, and services that present vulnerabilities in the United States and that pose the greatest potential consequences to the national security of the United States. The Secretary of Homeland Security, in coordination with sector-specific agencies and coordinating councils as appropriate, shall produce a written assessment within 80 days of the date of this order and annually thereafter. This assessment shall include an evaluation of hardware, software, or services that are relied upon by multiple information and communications technology or service providers, including the communication services relied upon by critical infrastructure entities identified pursuant to Section 9 of Executive Order 13636 of February 12, 2013, Improving Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity, end quote.
This part is so interesting here. I'll keep letting it play, though.
It really shouldn't be surprising at this point. But here again, we uncover another layer of corruption in our government. Executive Order 13873 calls for the Secretary of Homeland Security, in coordination with sector-specific agencies and coordinating councils, to identify the ICT hardware, software, or services relied upon by critical infrastructure entities. Remember, the EISCC is one of those coordinating councils, and Dominion is a member of the EISCC.
And so that's just the election infrastructure one. This just has to do with ICT. I wonder who's on. You know what? While this is playing, I'm going to look and see who is on the sector coordinating council for the ICT. Because if CrowdStrike's on there, I'm going to shit my pants.
It also shouldn't be surprising that the voting machines used in our elections are powered by Chinese hardware. That article doesn't name the manufacturer of the machine they studied, but the findings are incredible. Quote, efforts by the federal government and campaigns to keep state-sponsored hackers from Russia and China out of U.S. elections may have overlooked one major source of vulnerability: the hardware and software guts of voting machines. A study by the security firm Interos has found that 1/5, 20%, of the hardware and software components in a popular voting machine came from suppliers in China. Furthermore, close to 2/3, 59%, of components in that voting machine came from companies with locations in both China and Russia. The study is by Interos, a third-party risk software company. In it, the company analyzed both the hardware and software components used in a popular voting machine and then mapped the supply chain of the machine, including the companies further down the supply chain. These fourth and fifth party, or so-called settler suppliers, play a heretofore unstudied role in the creation of countless technology products, from networking gear to cameras and drones to voting machines. 20% of the hardware and software components came from suppliers in China. How have we been able to trust the results of any modern-day election? The answer is we can't. And the 2020 election provides a great example. January 6th, 2021, again. The beauty of my Devolution series becoming so popular is the fact.
Okay. So I got to show you guys this. I found the IT Sector Coordinating Council, and this is what they do. They deal with entities functioning as DNS, internet service providers, internet backbone, internet portal, networking, fiber optics, software, security services, communications companies, IT Edge, Core, IT System, IT Services providers, cloud service providers. You know what? What was that executive order again? It was 13636. Let me look this up quick too. Hold for processing, because I think I did find it, and I'm not actually going to shit my pants, but kind of makes me want to. 636. Share this tab quick. Hold for processing, guys, because I think this is important. Right here, improving critical infrastructure. Cybersecurity framework. Okay, so yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, so anyway, let me go back to this. This is the IT stuff. And again, this all relates to what we were just talking about here, where we're talking about the sector coordinating councils, right? It really shouldn't be surprising. EO 13873 calls for the Secretary of Homeland Security in coordination with sector-specific agencies and coordinating councils to identify the ICT hardware, software, or services relied upon by critical infrastructure entities, and check out who is on the information technology sector in the Sector Coordinating Council. We got CrowdStrike. Crazy shit. They are, it's just like Dominion being part of the EIS SCC. Same thing. There's a conflict of interest financially. The government gives them a waiver to be there. The whole thing. Insanity. Crazy. Okay, we'll keep going. I'm gonna have to dig into that a little further.
The fact that there are so many people adding bits and pieces that help complete the puzzle. Here is a perfect example. Drought tolerant on July 31st, quote, I checked the U.S. House floor, scheduled on January 6th. There was entry that President Trump sent a sealed letter on January 5th, which they opened on January 6th, shortly after noon, approximately 12:04 or 12:06 p.m. It contained a previously signed executive order which was passed to Gregory Meeks of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I don't recall the executive order number, but I believe it had to do with not allowing China software in our election system. Maybe you could confirm the schedule and make sense of the EO implications? Patriot Watch responds, here is the link for the sealed letter opening on the U.S. House of Representatives floor. Thank you, Patriot. The one right before that aligns with Executive Order 138482. I looked into this, and it was a bombshell. Check this out from House Floorcast. Sorry, this is as big as I could make it. It's okay, that's what I have glasses for. The House received a message from the clerk. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk notified the House that she had received a sealed envelope from the White House on January 5th, 2021 at 5:05 p.m., said to contain a message from the president regarding additional steps addressing the threat posed by applications and other software developed or controlled by Chinese companies. The Speaker laid before the House a message from the President transmitting a notification of a declaration of a national emergency with respect to the Information and Communications Technology, ICT, and Services Supply Chain declared in Executive Order 13873 of May 15th, 2019, referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs and ordered to be printed. Sure enough, on January 5th, the day before the insurrection, Trump issued Executive Order 13971, addressing the threat posed by applications and other software developed or controlled by Chinese companies. Here's the order. Quote, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, find that additional steps must be taken to deal with the national emergency with respect to the Information and Communications Technology and Services Supply Chain declared in Executive Order 13873 of May 15th, 2019, securing the Information and Communications Technology and Services Supply Chain. Specifically, the pace and pervasiveness of the spread in the United States of certain connected mobile and desktop applications and other software developed or controlled by persons in the People's Republic of China, to include Hong Kong and Macau, China, continue to threaten the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. At this time, action must be taken to address the threat posed by these Chinese connected software applications.
This is where, like I said, I was kind of getting too deep into the weeds. This is interesting. I mean, the executive order on January 5th is important. There's something there. I'm not necessarily sure this is even it. This part where I'm digging in on Tencent QQ and Tencent Holdings, which we're about to get into, you'll see what I mean. But I think this is like one of those things where I kind of wish I wouldn't have gone this far into it because I'm not sure how relevant this is. And I think I even say that in here. I'd probably say, like, why do they have a patent on election companies? I mean, whatever. It's maybe it's more important than I think, but like right now, I don't think this is that significant. But it's in here anyway, and I'm not going to go change anything ever. But
Section 1A. The following actions shall be prohibited beginning 45 days after the date of this order. To the extent permitted under applicable law, any transaction by any person or with any respect to any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States with persons that develop or control the following Chinese connected software applications or with their subsidiaries, as those transactions and persons are identified by the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary under subsection E of this section, Alipay, CamScanner, QQ Wallet, ShareIt, Tencent QQ, VMate, WeChat Pay, and WPS Office. End quote. Develop or control the following Chinese connected software applications. Remember that because I'm about to do some speculation, and I will admit this may be irresponsible solely because I'm not extremely knowledgeable in the world of ICT, maybe someone else out there is. These articles are the best way for me to get the word out. So if somebody else can strengthen or disprove the connection I'm about to make, I would be thrilled to share it. One of the companies that President Trump singled out in this executive order is Tencent QQ. Tencent QQ is owned by Tencent Holdings Limited. Tencent Holdings Limited has many subsidiaries in various markets for internet-related services and products. One of those subsidiaries is Tencent Technology, Shenzhen Company Limited. The United States has many different classifications for its patents. One such classification is Class 705/12, voting or election arrangement. Voting or election arrangement. This subclass is indented under subclass 1.1, subject matter determining the result of an election by multiple participants. Tencent Technology, Shenzhen Company Limited, holds a patent under the 705/12 voting or election arrangement below. The abstract discusses social networks, but looking through the actual patent, it seems to do more with servers. Please, somebody more skilled than I needs to look into this. Interaction system and method, client and background server, patent number 10861107, abstract. A method including at a client terminal of a user of a social network platform, displaying a first network resource published by a first resource publisher, displaying a resource rewarding affordance in association with the first network resource or an identifier of the first resource publisher, detecting user selection of the resource rewarding affordance, and in accordance with a determination that the resource rewarding affordance has been selected, while the resource rewarding affordance is displayed in association with the first network resource or the identifier of the first resource publisher, initiating a resource rewarding operation to reward the first resource publisher on the social network platform, wherein the resource rewarding operation transfers reward goods from a social network account of the user to a social network account of the first resource publisher on the social network platform. Assignee, Tencent Technology, Shenzhen Company Limited. In closing, we have a political party in this country that stole an election with assistance from a foreign adversary. Our federal agencies were complicit, and even the courts looked the other way. There are three branches of our federal government: legislative, executive, and judicial. What happens when two of those branches allow a foreign adversary to compromise the other? This has been a complete and total failure of both our legislative and judicial branches. The Constitution permits Congress to authorize the use of the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. These constitutional provisions are reflected in the Insurrection Acts, which have been invoked numerous times, both before and after passage of the Posse Comitatus Act, 18 United States Code, subsection 1385 in 1878. The Posse Comitatus Act outlaws the president from using any part of the armed forces to execute the law unless expressly authorized by the Constitution or an act of Congress. What happens if the Constitution has been trampled on? What happens if our Congress has been compromised? The Constitution guarantees the states protection against usurpation of their republican form of government. What if that usurpation was allowed by members of our own government in Washington, D.C., not a state, but a federal district, the literal seat of our government? The answer to all these questions is obvious. The military is our only solution to take back the constitutional form of government our founders intended for us. President Donald J. Trump left an opportunity for the military to take remedial actions to counter and correct the stolen election. Everything points to them seizing that opportunity. The best is yet to come.
All right, guys. Again, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. At the end there, got a little jumbled in my opinion, but once we get to part 8 and continue through, it gets much more relevant. And I'm starting to see like some of this ICT stuff. I'm definitely seeing that connect to some of the stuff we see playing out today, and I'm looking at it in a different light. Like the Sector Coordinating Council for IT with CrowdStrike being on there, that's just insane. But yeah, I love this series. If you guys want, now you can head over to Locals. I'm going to head over there here shortly, and we'll do a little Q&A if there's people over there willing to participate. So be sure to hit that little join button at the bottom. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up, and also big shout out and thank you to Jordan and Conscious Strength, consciousstrength.net, for sponsoring this episode of the recap series. You got to support the people who support us, right? That's how we continue to build our own little ecosystem. And Jordan's been a big support. So go check it out. See if there's anything on his website that interests you. I think health is a very important thing. And especially that coffee stuff. I'm going to get some of that coffee stuff with the mushroom in there myself, because I know the benefits of all that. But check it out, consciousstrength.net. Head on over to Locals now. I'll be over there in a minute. And also, make sure you guys tune in tonight on the Power Hour. We got lots to discuss. The last time we had a show last Wednesday with this group, we've had Kamala take over as the candidate since then. So it's crazy. It seems like a decade ago already that we've had our last Wednesday Power Hour, but it's only been a week. So it should be a fun episode. I'll see you guys over on Locals. I'm heading there right now. So let's see, how did I do this?